5 different types of databases. One is a hash database, and it differentiates between them using the extension on your file here. One is a hash database, which uses a TCH extension. One is a B plus tree database. It's a more advanced form of a binary tree, which uses the TCB extension. There's also the table database, which I don't use at all. I think it's kind of not in the... it's not what I would choose to use Tokyo Tyrant and Tokyo Cabinet for. I believe it's a TTC extension. I don't use that ever, so I might be wrong on that one. And then there's the in-memory databases, which are used if they don't have persistence to disk. It's more like memcache, whereas Tokyo Tyrant running as a hash or a B plus tree database would be more like memcache DB. In order to specify the in-memory ones, you use, I think, star is an in-memory... It's like star and at or something like that. I don't find them very useful, so I don't have... you can find that information very, very easy on the Tokyo Cabinet website. Baster casket.tch. I'm just going to use a hash database for now. Most of my tutorials are going to focus on the binary B plus tree database. I find it the most useful for some very, very real world scenarios. But the default's TCH, so I'm just going to leave it at that for now. And we're just going to get a very, very default instance up and running here. I'm actually going to copy this file and make another one, just so that I can show what you would have to do if you wanted to run 2 instances on the same server. You'll have to change the port, or it's going to error out when it tries to bind to the same port as the other instance. You have to change the process ID file, or it's going to check that file and it's going to think that there's already an instance running, already a process of running that instance running. Oh, it's kind of strange. And you're going to have to change the file name, obviously. So that's all you have to do in order to make sure that there's 2 instances running. This one is now bound to port 1979, whereas the other one is bound to port 1978. I'm going to go ahead and start both of those instances. This starts the first one, the one bound to 1978. And, oh yes, I'm going to create the data directory in /var/tt server. And for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm just going to switch its owner to the user I'm running right now, which is just going to make it easier for starting the database server and all that stuff. So ttserv control start, which isn't going to error out anymore, and you'll see it worked just fine, and ttserv control 2 start. And change your directory to /var/tt server, and list the files, and you'll see there's the casket2.tch file, which is the database file for the second instance, casket.tch, which is the database file for the first instance, and the process ID file for the first instance, and the process ID file for the second instance. So if we just, that you'll see it's using process ID 25,473, and this one's using 25,489, which you can verify if you run this guy. Hopefully you should be able to see that. Those are my 2 instances of TT server. Now, in order to actually interact with the database server, which is now running, Tokyo Tyrant also provides a script called TCR Manager. Not quite sure what it stands for. My best guess would be Tokyo Cabinet Remote Manager, something like that, because TC is a Tokyo Cabinet for something. But anyways, very, very useful is the TCR Manager inform command, which is going to tell you information about your database. I have 0 records, and my file size right now is 4 megabytes. If you add an ST switch to that, it's going to bring back a little more data. One that's very, very nice to have here is the memory size. Right now I'm using, 169 megs of memory. I'm not going to talk too much about memory usage now because we're not talking about tuning parameters, but you might be able to see that memory usage here is really low. It's for an actual database server that's running millions of rows, you'd probably want to use a lot more memory. So one of the things we're going to talk about in a later video is, balancing tuning parameters in such a way that you can use all the memory that you have available to you. TCR manager. TCR manager put is to put a value into the database. TCR manager get retrieves a value that you've previously stored. So I just got the value for the asdf key, which is asdf. TCR manager out deletes a key. Might as well do mget first. Mget gets multiple keys, asdf, and you can see it just got both keys back. TCR manager out deletes a key. There's a few others that are in there. Obviously, most of the time you'll be interacting with these databases using programs, so it's a little bit wonky to do too much operations from the command line here. TCR manager list can be nice. It shows all the keys in the database essentially, but you don't want to run that against a large database, obviously. I will point out that the sync, setmaster, and REPL ones are used for initiating replication scenarios. We're not going to get into replication here, obviously. TCR manager copy can be used for exporting your database. You probably want to come up with a better solution than that if you're trying to back up a really, really large database. But for now, like if I can go TCR manager copy localhost /rtd server backup.tch, and if I list, I have a backup.tch file there now. That's about it. The HTTP command here, TCR manager HTTP, can be used to run HTTP commands against the database, but I prefer the binary protocol, which is what these commands use by default. I suppose I should mention this protocols thing. Tokyo Tyrant supports 3 different types of protocols. One is a custom binary protocol that's very, very slim, very fast, and unless you're moving away from something else, I would recommend using it. There's bindings for a lot of different languages for the binary protocol, so it shouldn't be a problem finding one. I wrote custom .NET bindings for Tokyo Tyrant, the binary network protocol. It took me maybe 3 hours to fully implement the entire Tokyo Tyrant spec. So it's very, very simple. Like I said, it's very trimmed down. Tokyo Tyrant also supports the memcached protocol. If you're migrating from memcached or memcached-db to Tokyo Tyrant, one thing you should be aware of is that Tokyo Tyrant doesn't support the flag bytes in the memcache protocol. It will ignore them. So if any of your applications depend on certain values in the flag bytes, you're going to have to obviously do some changes in order to make sure that that doesn't affect your applications. It also supports an HTTP put, get, delete style API. Not going to go into details, but that can be useful if you're migrating from maybe something like CouchDB, where it's a strictly HTTP API. That's about it for the API. And now you have your up and running. We actually have 2 up and running instances of Tokyo Tyrant. You can use stop in order to stop it. You can restart, all that fun stuff. I'm going to focus now on one database instance. What I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly shove a few million rows into that instance. And I'm just doing this to really stress something I mentioned earlier, which is tuning parameters. A lot of people get to this point with Tokyo Cabinet and Tokyo Tyrant, and they start stress testing it, and they find it works really, really well for the first couple million rows, and it just dies after that. It starts coughing and wheezing its way through inserts and that sort of thing. And I just want to stress that that's not an actual problem with the database. You can scale these things up hugely. I've had billions of rows in Tokyo Tyrant and Tokyo Cabinet databases, but you have to look at the tuning parameters. So just using the default settings, I'm just going to do a quick run here on an import script I have created on my own time.